Andrew Dunn, Agency 3. First of all, a very brief comment, maybe just segueing from what was said about video games before. As far as Guitar Hero is concerned, I'm not a player, but my understanding is that the latest version provides an experience that's very similar to actually playing a guitar. And I would put the point potentially that this could offer many people the opportunity to learn something like that at a much lower price point than traditional tuition might offer. So there is a serious possibility there, I would say. But what I wanted to come back to was a theme which I think has been behind a lot of the discussion, which is the theme of anxiety related to change. And no doubt technology produces some of that. It also produces exhilaration, and that varies according to demographics to some degree. And certainly I think for older people sometimes it's almost uncool to be too excited about technological change because it's seen as being faddish, even if the change is good. But regardless of that, I want to ask whether change-related anxiety is currently, and perhaps will be in the future, even more of a social issue to deal with. And if so, even for the most positive changes, do we need to look at ways of managing change anxiety throughout the population?
Well, I think those are some great points. And I'll make one observation. I mean, yes, there's anxiety about change and this fear of the unknown, but I'll make 2 points about that, which is it's remarkable that once a change happens, I mean, when I sometimes describe things in the future, people think that they're quite afraid of it and it's going to be credible when it happens or scary. Then when it happens, it's like no big deal. It gets accepted really quickly. The fact that you could talk to your phone in natural language and it will talk back to you and say, well, did you mean your mother? And which people are now doing with Siri, that would have seemed incredible 3 years ago. But now that it's happened, it's okay, it's just a feature, and people talk about the pros and cons and what works and what doesn't, and does Google have one that's as good? We get used to change very quickly. And another point about people thinking that the world is getting worse is because we have much better information about what's wrong with the world. If there's a battle in Fallujah, not only do we hear about it, we're there, we experience it, we're right in the battle. There's some problem with availability of medicine in Nigeria, we're there. Maybe we can't actually solve it right away, and because we're a compassionate species, we feel badly about it. And people's algorithm for determining are things getting better or worse is, how often do I hear about problems? Well, people hear about problems much more often because we have such great information about the problems that they think things are getting worse. It's not like these problems didn't exist 200 years ago. 30,000 people could die in a battle in World War II, and if you saw it at all, it was in a grainy newsreel in the movie theaters 3 weeks later. Read Thomas Hobbes or Charles Dickens as to how brutish and disaster-prone and disease-filled human life was a couple hundred years ago. I mean, I will show on Friday ways in which the world is, in fact, persistently getting better because of these technologies. But one of the things that's getting better is our knowledge of what's wrong.
Can I just respond to that too? Because I think that from my point of view, and I travel around the world all the time into different cultures, so I'm not coming from a Eurocentric US point of view at all. And what I see, without doubt, is increased levels of anxiety. But I don't put that increased level of anxiety down to technology per se. In fact, I think technology, in most people's perceptions, is just, tools. I think the anxiety is coming from the unknown and the uncertainty and the ambiguity surrounding things like what we hear through the media about issues like climate change, poverty, terrorism, and those things that immediately concern us as human beings and how we relate to each other and to the planet.
Excuse me. Look, I might take slightly more than a minute to ask this question.
But you'll introduce yourself, won't you, Nicholas?
Sorry. Nicholas Gruen, CEO of Lateral Economics and a shareholder of Kaggle, which is a company that I wanted to tell you a brief story about and then ask a question based on it. Kaggle is started in Melbourne, and it set up a platform for crowdsourcing data analytics. So we take data, we specify what kind of model we want people to build, and we can therefore work out who's built the right model, and we've had extraordinary things have happened as a result. in one competition, we put some data up and we asked people to build a model that would predict who in a cadre of HIV patients would be likely to get sicker next week and who wouldn't, based on their genetic makeup. Within a week and a half, the best performance in the previous 4 years had been blown away, and the competition was won by the person who did that in a week and a half, a couple of months later. The name of the person who won it was a guy called Chris Raymond. He lives in Baltimore. He runs a one-person search engine optimization business. He knows nothing about bioinformatics, has never done any statistics at university, and taught himself how to do this on the R package, an open source data analytics package, on YouTube videos.
Now there's the super connected world, isn't it?
Spare a thought for the team that came second, because that was the TJ Watson Research Centre at IBM. So one of the things that it leads one to conclude is that there are going to be more and more things which are like Microsoft Word, which is that you don't go and learn them in a course, which is what we used to do about 15 years ago. You pick them up as you do them. And yet we have a kind of an educational establishment which is dedicated to the proposition that you can't even learn how to run a tourism business except by going and getting a diploma. So can I ask you for some reflections on that issue?
Great question. Daniel.
Yes, I'm the only professional educator here. I think you're right that there's going to be a lot more of that kind of learning. Actually, that's all, to echo Ray, that's been going on a lot. The history of science, the history of technology is full of stories of people who basically taught themselves what they needed to know on the fly. And I think you're right that this is an important phenomenon in the world that we should foster and look for. And I also think what was sort of implied in what you said is that the educational establishment is going to be balky about this. It is not going to embrace this with much enthusiasm in many quarters. In some quarters, I think it will. A question that I don't know the answer to, and I don't know if anybody does, is what areas is this sort of learning really graceful for and really useful for, and what areas isn't it useful for? And let's not waste our time and energy and the attention span of our children by trying to teach them in some formal way stuff that they'll pick up on their own anyway. But there are, I think, bitter experience is going to show us that there's just no substitute for the sort of education that is systematic and time-consuming and even grinding. There's still going to be a role for that. And one thing that I worry about is that at least the pampered young people of the United States of America are not going to have any taste for that. And they're going to end up doing the sorts of things in life that you can pick up on your own by playing video games. And all the other really innovative work is going to be done by people who are raised in traditions where you put the nose to the grindstone and you do some real hard work.
Thank you. We're galloping to time up, so
But
a very
I mean,
quick point. Thanks, Ray.
one issue I'm passionate about is bringing entrepreneurship into the schools. What little I've managed to learn in my life, it's been from doing my own projects. We founded a university, Singularity University. I won't describe it, but the key aspect of it are team projects where 8 to 10 students self-organize and then take on a project which can last for many years. to take on some world challenge, like availability of water or housing. But I think we should bring entrepreneurship into high schools and junior high schools. And there's this idea that in order for kids to learn, we should keep them totally busy, morning, noon, and night, and not really give them the freedom to do their own projects. And entrepreneurship doesn't have to mean a technology venture. It can be starting a new dance company or a theater group or a social philanthropic venture. There's many different things that they can do, and you learn a lot in the process, whether the project succeeds or not, and you learn how to learn, and you learn how to solve problems. You know, a lot of education is spent spoon-feeding facts which are not needed anymore. I'm not saying that all of schooling should be entrepreneurial-based. I mean, I agree with Dan that there are subjects you need to sit down and study, certain areas of science and mathematics that need to be learned that way, at least until we come up with something better. But
All right.
entrepreneurship, I think, should be an important part of schooling.
Thanks, Ray. A couple of short questions because we really will have to wrap up.
My name's Elise Bailey. I'm training in psychiatry at the Alfred Hospital. And my question is, in my work, I've noticed an increase in prevalence of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and the prescription of Ritalin in children, which is quite concerning. My question is, what do you see as the consequence of this rapid, superconnected world on our capacity for sustained attention? And the second part is, do we need to create rituals around disconnecting in this superconnected world, or is that just a losing battle?
Fabulous question.
I think it's just about balance. I agree with you. My view on ADHD is what you want to do is to monitor children and their cognitive behavior and find alternative ways in which to engage them as opposed to, and effect behavioral change as opposed to drug-based methodologies, which is not an ideal method for children, in my personal opinion. But in terms of this super-connected world, I think, yes, the whole point of it is it's an enabling tool that we choose to connect with. But at the same time, we have the opportunity to disconnect so that we can re-engage with the people around us and to see the world, because it's quite different to see Egypt online as opposed to actually going there and seeing it for yourself. I mean, the immensity of the place and the awe and the inspiration that you get from being there is completely different to what you would experience virtually. And so I think until we get better technologies where it does feel like we're there, I mean, there is a lot to be said to actually experience things for ourselves. So yes, it's about a balance, in my opinion.
Quick take from you, Daniel. You had a thought I could see.
No, I think she said it well.
Okay.
Okay, another.